Hello, and welcome to the next video in our Wild Souls Healing Vulnerability series. I'm Julie.
And I'm Jamie, and we're here to have a conversation.
Today we're going to be talking about something that's been on our hearts and minds since it happened, and that is the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Let's take a deep breath. Yep. So, Jamie.
Yes.
Yes. I'm talking to you now.
Yes.
Talk about how you felt when you first heard about the decision.
So, I was sitting on the couch right over there, actually. And I was just kind of scrolling through social media, and I started seeing people talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because not funny, haha, but funny like, holy crap. I remember when the leak happened about the decision, and there was a lot of speculation about whether or not that was, real or planted or whatever. And I remember as I was hearing stories being produced about that leak, I remember thinking, there's no way. Like, that
was kind of my feeling too. Like, this can't be real.
Scary, but I was like, there's no way. So on that Friday, when I started seeing people on social media talking about it, and I don't remember what website I went to, but it was just like local news or something. I was seeing if they had said something about it, and it was confirmed. I remember thinking, holy shit. Like, I didn't know anything. I felt like, what was I thinking? How naive could I have been? This has actually happened. And my head started to kind of spin out a little bit, where I was worried about, my brain immediately went to, what does this mean now about the future? What does it mean for me personally? What does it mean for, other women that I love and I care about? Or like, I started to spin out almost immediately about the danger of what this decision poses. So, I felt a lot of anger, not even anger, it was like unbridled rage. And a lot of sadness, because it felt like I was learning that someone I knew had died. That's what it felt like. I just started kind of sobbing, and not really with like the idea that now the whole world is terrible, like there's no hope. I didn't go there immediately. I went there a little bit later, but
it took about 5 minutes.
Right? But at first it felt like I was learning that something or someone that I knew and cared about had died. That's what it felt like.
What person was that? America?
I guess that's actually, it's a good question, because I think it was my my sense of safety and belonging to something that I really believed in and had a lot of pride in. That's what felt like had died.
So some disillusionment.
Yeah, it felt like my own government. This is not the first time I felt this way, by the way, but like it felt like the most severe, that my own government, my own country was saying something specifically to me that was really hurtful. Like, I don't care about you anymore. You're not safe here. You're not a priority. You don't have any choices. And like, it became very
personal.
Very personal. Yeah. Yeah.
So you just mentioned it, like, what fears were coming up? It sounds like there was some fear really activated.
To me, the whole thing felt kind of less practical at first. It was less practical about, like, how does this change laws? Like, specifically, for me, it was a little bit more theoretical, because it felt like I don't matter. Like, the work that I do and helping women remember how sovereign and important they are, felt like all of that didn't matter. And so it felt really theoretical, which I think for me was actually harder, because that's not something that you can
Say more, like really outline that connection for me, like how it felt like almost threatening to your work and your like purpose.
Yeah, so the overturn of the law itself for me didn't have as much to do with abortion specifically. I know that that's kind of the highlight issue, but it's, for me, it was taking away the protection of privacy, which was actually what Roe v. Wade was about, and taking away the federal protection for a woman to have the ability to choose what happens with her body, like in a very private conversation between her and a doctor and her family. Like, it felt like that was what was being that was becoming endangered. And so that ability to recognize your own power, your own ability to create your own safety, those are things that we talk about in our work with women. And so that felt directly threatened for me. Not because I got here later, not because it actually is threatened. I know that now that it's not. But in that moment, I kept thinking to myself, how, and I actually texted you this, how am I supposed to keep going, trying to convince women that they matter when their own country just told them that they didn't? That's what that felt like. Again, that's not accurate.
I was going to ask, where'd you land on that question?
It's not accurate, but that's what I was feeling at the moment, because it did feel like, I've only ever lived in America. So I became I've just like most people are very comfortable with the fact that I have the choice to make my own decisions about a lot of things. And the government can't come in and tell me how this is going to happen or can't happen. And so that felt like all of a sudden that rug had been pulled out from underneath my feet. And because so much of our work with Wild Souls Healing, with women specifically, but really with anybody, is centered around recognizing your own responsibility and your own ability to create safety for yourself. That felt like it was directly threatened, or certainly not reinforced.
Right. It was a message in direct opposition to that.
Right.
So how did you kind of come to terms with that? As far as you said, you got there later.
Yeah.
You felt differently after you processed it a little bit.
I felt a little less like the bottom had fallen out. After some time, and this is kind of how I work just in general, I typically freak out right at first. I have a reaction, just like every other human. And then I will usually give myself some moments to breathe, and then I'll come back and look at it as objectively as possible. So trying to take out what felt very personal about it and set it over here for a second, and just look at, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling that way? How can I take back responsibility? How can I take back the power in that experience, instead of handing all of that power to someone else or another entity? And I just feel terrible and I have no choices. You know what I mean? So it takes me some time, but I think where the shift happened for me was a thought occurred in my mind where this has happened in our nation's history over and over and over again. When a people group becomes a little bit too powerful, and a little bit too independent, and a little bit too rowdy, and not as obedient as some would like. Really, the only thing that anyone in power can do is change the laws. I mean, outside of like martial law, where everything just goes into chaos, but that's really the only thing that can shift. And so I noticed that within myself, I started to ask, but why is this happening? Not like why is it feeling this way for Jamie, but objectively speaking, why is this happening now? And I'm not a historian. I'm not a politician. I'm not involved in our government. So, like, I don't know if this is correct or accurate or whatever, but what I felt like was the answer for me was there is a shift in power, that it's not just men, or it's not just white men, or it's not just white straight men in their 60s and 70s that are holding positions of power anymore. It's there is more diversity in that, and there are a lot of other voices that are coming to the table.
Definitely.
That's scary for
Yeah,
people
I'm
that
sure.
have traditionally been in power for so long. So I had to kind of look at it, take a step back and look at it as just sort of the bigger picture. And what began to shift in me was that I noticed almost, I went from like hopelessness to this is terrible and this is never going to get better, and just here we are. It's the Handmaid's Tale. We're here.
Yeah.
Which is not a good comparison, by the way. But I noticed myself moving from that to feeling like this is almost evidence that individuals are beginning to really take hold of their own power. They're beginning to exercise their own power. They're beginning to see themselves as sovereign. Because the only response to that positions of power can have is to change laws. I mean, that's the only thing they can do.
And do you think a law can affect a person's personal power or sovereignty?
So I've struggled with that a little bit, because there are practical applications of this law that, yes, they can limit. Specifically, if you're in a state where like legitimately has limited the choices or rights that you once had. So practically, I think that it's possible for a law to limit someone's options. Where I got to was putting the practical application aside and just looking at, can a change in law actually make me feel or change how much sovereignty or power I actually experience in my own being? And for me, the answer to that is no. And I also recognize that I am not a woman who is looking to have an abortion. I'm also not a woman of color who is in a very specific situation where I am in more danger than most. So I'm looking at that from my perspective, not being in some of those situations that will directly be affected by this.
Right.
So there's a level of privilege there that I recognize 100%. It's very easy for me to say that I can still feel powerful. I can still feel like a sovereign being. I understand why someone else would not be feeling that, especially if they live in a state with a trigger law that just went into place, an hour after that decision was made, and their life choices were immediately limited. I know that it cannot. It's possible that it doesn't feel that way for them.
Of course.
So there's space in my mind for all of that.
Yeah.
And the conflict of all of that.
Right. And I mean, I guess that's really the question you were grappling with from the beginning, is how does someone in that position maintain their feeling of power and sovereignty?
Right.
I don't know that there's an easy answer to that.
I think the questions like that are, I think now that's actually what I'm seeing more on social media are very pointed answers of no to that question. I don't think it's that simple.
I don't think it is either.
I think it's very personal and individual according to where you live and what your specific situation is. I do believe that it is possible for a person, no matter what their situation is, to be living in a place where they are not legally supported by a government and still feel like a powerful individual. And I'm talking about this on a theoretical sense.
Right.
I do think that that's possible. It is a lot harder for some people than others, literally depending on how much money they have, the color of their skin, where they live geographically. Like, there are a lot of other factors that I understand.
Of course.
I do think that it's possible.
I think it's possible too, but I also think that's like the soul work. That's the spiritual
Yeah.
work that each of us have to do in whatever individual situation that we have, you know?
Yeah, and that was another interesting shift for me too, is that at the beginning, you know, feeling like, well, now my work doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Now this work doesn't matter because the government doesn't support it. When, I mean, let's be real, how much did the government support it before? I don't know, it doesn't matter. There was a shift that happened when I started to really kind of back up and look at the larger picture that helped me understand that not only does the work that we do matter,
mm-hmm.
but it just becomes that much more important. Yes.
That was what came to me, like, okay, this is what we're doing is so important because of situations like this, because this is the climate and the environment that we're in.
Yes.
And when you hit something, or like something, you're faced with a situation and an environment that feels so disempowering, mm-hmm. we need people to remind us mm-hmm. that you matter, mm-hmm. you are powerful, you are sovereign, mm-hmm. and whatever the government says, right. you know, we can
right.
If you want, we can find a workaround. We can figure this out. You know,
there are options.
Yes, mm-hmm.
as limited as they may be.
Yes,
there are options,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's something that we, definitely myself included, when you're in a state of survival, when you feel that kind of slap in the face of something that's happened that is just really upsetting. Our critical thinking brain
goes out the window.
Doesn't really know how to function in that moment. That's the whole fight.
It's like, bye.
Yeah. So I think that's an important role that we also have in this work too, is that if it's someone who is feeling like they're right in the middle of that mm-hmm. fear and rage, and the fact that they feel that is not in and of itself a problem. Mm-hmm. And when they're ready mm-hmm. to really kind of take a breath, to take a step back and go, okay, so what do I do now? Mm-hmm. Then to have some support, mm-hmm. like the kind of support that we provide, to say, let's think about the options, because there always are some. You may not just have them at the front of your brain, especially when you're in that
very much.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Okay. How do you grapple with the knowledge that people you know and love feel good about this decision?
So that was also a part of me first learning about this too, is that I immediately thought of specific people in my own family or circle that I knew felt like this was a good thing. And this is not the first time that I've been in that position where something happens kind of, broadly, like an election, where I know that there are people that made them feel good, that mm-hmm. made them feel happy. They felt mm-hmm. like their government heard them, and they felt exactly the opposite. They felt very supported by that decision. And again, I'm a human just like everybody else, so my brain immediately goes to, well, I guess they're happy good for them. I'm suffering and they're happy, so great.
What terrible people.
Terrible people. Clearly I'm good and they're bad. That, my brain goes there first, of course. But when giving myself a chance to kind of just take in, I can't control anybody else's reactions, so just take in what my own feelings are about that. What I like to ask myself is, because if these are people that I know and love, there are aspects of that I understand. I may not agree with, but I understand why they would feel supported or good, mm-hmm. or like this was a good decision. And for me, it's about trying to connect with that person on what we can see eye to eye about. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's really, really, really hard. Mm-hmm. I don't know what the answer to that is necessarily, mm-hmm. but I don't want anything to be something that I use as a way to separate myself from people that I care about.
A barrier to connection.
Yeah, I don't want, especially something like this, I don't want to use something like that to put up a wall. It doesn't mean that I want to have the conversation with them about this right away. I'm not talking about at the dinner table, with family, but maybe someday. And I think I understand why they would feel that way. I can disagree and still be able to feel the humanity where they're coming from.
Right.
I think that's important.
That's a hard place to get to.
Very
sometimes.
Hard,
yeah. I think all the time, actually.
Yeah. I think the more personal something feels, the harder it is to do that.
Definitely.
It's not impossible, but that's why I think looking at something, when you're ready, looking at something as objectively as you can and taking the personal part of it, you don't have to throw it out, but just put it on a shelf for a second and just look at each other as humans that have our own experiences, that have our own traumas, that have our own past experience. Being able to connect with each other just as humans, I think, helps not immediately create division.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we're required to agree with each other. I think we think that's like giving up a fight or something.
Right. Yeah, we think if we can actually understand another side to whatever the issue is, then we're conceding.
Yeah, if you're losing. Yeah.
Yes.
They convinced you.
Yeah.
Right. Right. We're far more complicated than that. So
yeah, understanding does not equal agreement.
Correct.
And I think people forget that.
Even identifying with where they may be coming from also does not mean that you agree, and that's okay.
Yeah. I don't think people really go there very often.
Well, it's incredibly uncomfortable. It feels like you're giving up. It feels like you're giving up.
Yeah.
And when we're and I say we because I'm absolutely in this group, when we are really invested in the idea of feeling right, it feels like there is no other option. Like they either agree with you or you can't be friends. You can't talk to each other or whatever.
Do you think the need to feel right and to hold fast in your convictions in these kind of situations is giving people a sense of power and control that maybe is feeling threatened? So
sure.
Yeah.
I think in some cases, yeah. I think in general, whenever something's going on and we don't really understand it, we immediately try to categorize things so that, okay, so I just need to know who's the villain and who's the hero,
right,
so that I can structure it in my brain and I can begin to understand what the hell is going on. So I think we immediately start to try to move people into the group of right and the group of wrong, good, bad, the hero, villain, and because that helps us make sense of something that doesn't make a lot of sense. That's a very human, normal, natural thing to do, and it creates division where it may not have to.
Yeah. And
listen, if y'all don't want to talk to your parents about things, that's fine. I'm not saying that you should. You do whatever you want.
No.
You do whatever you want.
Do not attempt to talk about this at Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh my God.
This is not a appropriate Christmas conversation. Christmas morning. And you're all sitting around in your pajamas, your matching pajamas.
Oh, jeez.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. Please don't do that. Or, do whatever you want, and good luck.
Okay, what has been your experience in meeting your own need for safety and sovereignty in the wake of this decision and everybody's responses to it?
I think first and foremost, and this is something that I think everybody understands for sure, is I always have the option to limit what the amount and the kind of information that I take in.
Yes.
I don't have to read about this every day. I don't have to have the news on every day where I'm like keeping track of all the talking heads and all their opinions. I think that for me is is the first step, is to just recognize how much do I want to be inundated with everyone else's opinion. And for me, at the very beginning of learning about this and just trying to tease out what I was feeling and why, I looked at a little bit of that, but then I recognized right off the bat that it's not helpful for me. Let me figure out my own experience of this. And then if I want to engage with other people about it, great, but I don't have to. So I think it's kind of like the regular normal needs that we have in any given day. It's, am I getting enough rest? Am I giving myself a break from all of the information coming at me at one time?
Is reading every article you can find about it and arguing with people on Facebook in the comments actually helping anything? Right. Is it helping you understand the issue? Is it affecting change, or is it just making you feel like shit? Right.
Yeah. That's what I have to ask myself constantly. Is like, is what I'm doing, is it nourishing me? And I think there's a piece of that for me that does feel really nourishing, and that is reminding myself that anyone can do and say whatever they want.
They're sovereign too.
Yeah, and I don't have to participate in that if I don't want to.
Yeah.
And so I get the keyboard warriors. I understand that.
Yeah, it makes you feel righteous and right.
And you're also really, really angry, or you're really hurt, or you're responding to someone that's really angry, and you know what? Y'all do whatever you want. And every time that I let go of my need to engage or control some of that, it helps me feel more at peace with anything, but especially something that's controversial.
Right. Okay.
Those are like the little mini steps at the beginning. as like we've been talking about, I think as I continued to process this, I felt myself looking at this as an opportunity to expand the work that we do so that as few people as possible feel like a change like this actually does make them less powerful.
Right. How can we reach those people?
Right.
What can we do?
Right.
So that the law, we can make it as disempowering as possible. Or as, I said that wrong.
I understand what you're saying.
As non-disempowering as possible.
Yeah, I think the it's not another side. I think it's involved in this too, is it became really important to me to support those that did feel really good about this decision and how they were communicating with people that felt really angry and hurt. Because there's an opportunity there where you don't have to feel right all the time either. And we made a post about that. I made a post about this that night, I think, or maybe the next day. Just simply saying, like, for those of you that are really happy about this, listen, you can feel happy about this. Like, these conversations are not about me saying what's right and wrong. Everyone can feel however they feel. And you also know what it's like to feel disempowered. You also know what it's like to feel really angry and hurt by a decision made out of your control by a large entity that, it feels like something personal for you is being taken away. You know what that feels like, no matter where you fall on one issue or another. So what if, instead of trying to defend something, what if you just took a moment to connect with the other person based on what you do understand that they're feeling? You do not have to agree with them, but maybe you do understand exactly what it feels like to feel really sad, to feel really frustrated by this.
Yeah, maybe we could acknowledge each other's shared humanity instead of creating more barriers and more division between us.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That'd be nice.
That'd be something to try, guys. Give it a shot. See how it feels.
Maybe, just maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's ever a destination necessarily. I don't know. I don't even know it feels kind of Pollyanna to me sometimes, but
right.
I think the pursuit of that is really important, even if it's not like, some place that we get to where everybody just loves each other and has so much compassion. I don't even know if that's ever going to be a thing, but I like the pursuit of that.
Yeah. Keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta have something that you stand for, right? We fall for anything. What song was that? Who said that? I don't remember.
It was a quote that I cannot remember.
Who knows?
It's been on t-shirts and bumper stickers.
Everywhere.
Yeah. I cannot remember where that came from. I don't know.
Something boomers say. I love boomers. There's no judgment. Anyway, that's all I have for anything else you want to add? Any final thoughts?
I just want to encourage everybody that there's no easy answer to that. So,
yeah,
just give it up for adoption. Okay. Or
have y'all been pregnant? Because that's
right.
I have.
Right.
And that was not an easy experience.
There's no easy answer to any of these
to
any of these questions. So I think if we can just listen, I really don't care where anybody falls on either side of this. If we could just allow ourselves to be uncomfortable with the fact that this is just uncomfortable, and maybe not rush into trying to tell somebody else what they should be doing with their body.
Right.
Maybe those conversations would be easier if we didn't just rush in with like, oh, well, you have all of these other choices you could have made. Okay. Well, that's not helpful now. And because there's no easy answer to this, I don't think there's really a necessity for us to approach each other that way. Just a suggestion.
Right.
Maybe just listen. If somebody is really in the middle of something that this directly affects, like maybe just listen. You don't have to give them advice at all. There's that.
I mean, anyone who's considering this has very good reasons and has a story. I'm not buying into this whole idea that people use it just because they were too lackadaisical or lazy to get on birth control and they're just running around like being irresponsible. Yeah. I just don't really feel like that's the norm, and that's the narrative that is being pushed. But I mean, I have not talked to a single person well that's been the case.
Right.
Or I've seen like on the internet, I've not seen any story like that, or I'm not buying it. But that's just my personal opinion.
I think it's far more important for us to maybe just show up for each other.
Yeah.
In whatever our experiences are, especially around this, because there isn't a one-stop shop answer to any of this stuff. So everybody's having their own experience and their own chaos around it. Like everybody's having that, and it's also really individual. So I would just love it if you're listening to this. I would love it if we could just simply be someone that someone else can talk to and feel safe with. You don't have to agree. You don't have to agree. You don't have to take them to a clinic. Like you don't have to be that person. But I really want to encourage us to maybe be the person that someone else can feel safe enough to just say, hey, I'm really struggling and I just need someone to listen to me. I just need someone to hear me.
Hear my story.
Yeah.
Don't make assumptions about what's happening or why I'm doing things. Please. Actually listen.
Yeah.
Hear and see me.
So there's your challenge.
All right. Okay. Well, this has been fun.
Yeah. Not too bad.
No. We'll be back soon. I think the next topic we have is we're going to be talking about money. So
dun, dun, dun.
Stay tuned.
It's going to be juicy.
Yep. It's going to be fun. Okay. Well.
Cheers.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. I'm going to edit that out. That's going on the blooper reel.